important.
The American Negro is either going to be free or he's going to be dead.
Power? We don't. Revolution pulse in the youth veins. Heartbeat loud, breaking old chains. System trembles when the young stand bold. Future in our hands, fire in our soul. History shifts when the young move strong.
So what was it the brother reached out and said to you, Brother Wall?
Basically, that we're not putting it, we don't have a process video that kind of breaks down a process of solutions. We analyze basically heavily analyze the problem, and then we may end on a cliffhanger that just provides a statement or two of what the solution is, but that we're not actually building a video around around the solutions and how to get from point A to point B solution wise. That's paraphrasing.
So he would like us to kind of detail how to get from point A to point B when we're analyzing these issues.
Yeah, in terms of the solution.
And as E said before we started recording, what he hears is Doc saying we need a class. Can you expand on that a little bit, E? Your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it because we've talked about solutions all the time. I mean, we're very, I think over the years, have learned to be very sensitive to that idea of just putting out, what do you call it, what the problem is. The problem is maybe because we came up hearing so many people saying, what the problem is and not going any further. But so we posited what the solutions are many, many, many times, but the only way I can interpret that is that there's some disconnect, which would make sense, between this is what we need to do and okay, here's how we do it. Folks, I guess, especially if they're organized, and work better from having some type of framework, some type of concrete, some type of follow the yellow brick road type shit. If you told Dorothy, hey, go see the Wiz, and she just start wandering around like, don't know what it looked like, where it lives, what to do with it, none of that. So folks who are attempting to organize, especially if they're not used to it or used to the critical thinking and analysis and that part of it, or they're just coming into it and realizing whatnot, almost always, I would think, need some type of guidance. And to tell folks, this is what you need to do. And I guess it's the same sort of thing. I watch a lot of trash TV's reality shit when I have my downtime, my vegetative state time, because they're funny to me. Their foolishness is just funny. But when I hear them try to console each other, these baddies and housewives and all, they try to tell folks what they need to do to get their life together, they'll say exactly that. You just need to get your stuff together. And that's it.
Yeah.
There's no clarity as to what any of those words mean. Steps to take to get my life together. What does my life together look like? All of that. And that's one thing that even though I'm watching the shows so that I can, to the best of my abilities, turn off the thinking for a little while and get some fucking relaxation, a little relaxation, I'm still looking at it through that eye, which sucks sometimes. But so, and that's one of my criticisms when I hear it. It's like you keep saying this over here, but you ain't telling nobody how to get to that over there. You're not Google Maps. You just, a website with pictures, and that's it. So being able to lay out some type of process for establishing, number one, what it looks like, and working back from that. This is what it looks like. This is why it looks like that. This is what was done to us. And that's the part that scares a lot of people away, even when those folks are willing to dig in and have a conversation about it. They don't want to talk about the trauma. And that's psychology 101. If you can't talk about the trauma, that's it. There's no more conversation left to be had as far as I'm concerned, because I can tell you the steps to get to it, but because you haven't dealt with the trauma, you're going to be shooting yourself in the foot every step along the way. You're not really going to be committed to it, because what was it? Somebody said, old school saying, anything worth having is worth going through the trouble of getting. If you're not willing to go through a conversation about the pain and trauma that we've had to deal with all of this time as part of the process, then you don't really want it. Because we will put ourselves through all kinds of shit to get the nicest car. You know, chicks will hold themselves out for a new pair of shoes. Dudes will run each other down, stab and kill each other, so we can, you know, get some money or get some chick or whatever nonsense. So if we're not willing to go to the extremes of reading, sitting down in a classroom, shutting up, listening to something, having a conversation at the appropriate time about these topics, then we're really not committed to getting to that point. It's just conversation, which again is a reflection of this society. Just to say that I'm down, just to say that I'm for Black empowerment, that's it. That's all you have to do. And you qualify as an activist now. You qualify as supporting Black folks just because you said the words. So the words have become, it's like war. You've been enough of in your career. You were boots on the ground. You did tech work. You were out there sweating in the lanes. Blah 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 blah. So you know the grinding in the life of doing it, as opposed to somebody who comes into the same field, same industry, same company, who's never done that, but sits behind a computer and sends out emails about that. They have no clue what those words really mean. Hey, y'all need to get this done by the end of the week, da-da-da-da-da. You and I, because we've been on the ground doing the tech work, knows that's going to be a lot of work. That's not going to happen at a time. We know those things. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Because we've experienced versus somebody who says that they are qualified just because they can send out an email with some words. It's the same idea. You living in the words. You living on the top, as opposed to digging in and dealing with the grind. The difference between theory and application. And we're not willing to dig into the application of know thyself, of know your history, of Black excellence, of Black history, Black History Month. We're not willing to dig into what that really means. And so that for me has always been like step one. And you know, you can take it further, the idea of a process. Well, how do you dig in? How do you get to that? Well, you need to go see a therapist, because that deals with shadow work and whatnot, and whatever you got to get over. But the reality of it is, the idea of it is, at some point, you have to be able to make a decision to go through these steps and not balk and not do and self-reflect. And that's probably the most painful part that people don't want to sign in to this type of shit for. But yeah, that's what I hear. That's how that hits me, is that where's the breakdown? All of this generational stuff that we've acquired over the years, whatever, you know, knowledge, wisdom, or whatever that we've come into, you know, where's the breakdown with this? You know, where's our P48 laws of power in the process? Because we talk about the process, but I don't know that we've ever gone in and just really broken it down and chopped it up. And you know, I know Syke, when he went on hiatus, he essentially did. And so that would probably be our best jump off point, is to break down the Uhuru Shule. You know, what is that really talking about? Starting with the definitions, Mr. Syke, of the words, and just building on it from there. So, yeah.
And I see Doc's question kind of going back into what we used to say all the time. I'm not going to say when we first started reading, but when we first started realizing that it's time to take reading from just being something that was inspirational to being something that we could actually manifest. And we'd be reading books and back in the day, and we'd say, man, he's telling us what's wrong, but they're not really giving us a process on how to do it. Like you just said, they're saying, empower yourself. And we're feeling it, and we're motivated by that. Then when we get all excited, we stop and say, well, hell, how do I do that? And either the book that we was reading at the time didn't tell us how, or we didn't have the insight to understand the how. It's one thing that I started to realize when I was on hiatus is that if we read a book, we can read a book and we're supposed to look for formulas. That's one of the things that was taught in the Huru Shule. One of the lessons in the Huru Shule is called the science of building. And in that science of building, it explains that when you read intentionally. You don't just read. You read with an intention. Example, it says that if you're about to start a prison sentence, then what you want to do is you want to look for other people who have productively done a prison sentence. People, my people that I look to are people like Malcolm X, Mumia Abu-Jamal, Nelson Mandela, George Jackson. We look at these brothers. How did they do their time? Let's take Malcolm X and the autobiography of Malcolm X for a moment. How did he do his time? It talks about him digging deep into reading. What's the first step that he took when it came to reading? He said he got him a dictionary and he copied the entire dictionary. I did something similar. I didn't copy the entire dictionary, but I refused to allow myself to go past a word that I didn't know. By passing up words that you don't know, but you think you know, and the best way to find that out is just ask yourself, what does that mean? And if you cannot easily define it in a clear way that'll help anybody understand what it means, you don't know the meaning. So that means it's time for us to look this word up, because that one word can skew your entire understanding of the sentence. You get those words together, then it opens the sentence up for you. Now you start looking at the blueprint. What did Malcolm do? He did his vocab rehab. So that was something we added to the Huru Shule, a concept called vocab rehab. We rehabilitated our vocabulary. Then once rehabilitating your vocabulary, you start looking at the steps that Malcolm took to go from being Detroit Red to becoming Malcolm X, El Haj Malik El Shabazz. You look at the steps that he took. And then you can follow the process. You can copy the process. There is nothing on the planet that we want to do that hasn't already been done. You could either go and reinvent the wheel, or you can base your invention on what already exists. And that's the most intelligent thing that you could possibly do. But as E said, you are right. I was trying to produce a process, and the Uhuru Shule starts with the bylaws and the curriculum. That's a lesson in itself, just understanding that. It's mandated that you have to learn verbatim the 10 virtues of a student. You have to be able to spit them. And that is done for a reason, a couple of reasons that is done. One, so that you can internalize the ideals there, but two, you're preparing your mind for deeper learning. And I can admit that I got this from Elijah Muhammad. I got this from the Nation of Islam and the 5 Percenters. I was around a lot of 5 Percenter brothers when I was on that island. And these brothers, they'll walk up to each other. Hey, brother, what's today's mathematics? And they would go. One is knowledge. Knowledge is the black. They would go. They would spit it. They would bring it from the top of the head. And you start to realize something about how the brain works. The brain special, and I'm not going to go deep. I'm just going to get to the point. The brain specializes. And I took horticulture class, and me and a dude was sitting right next to each other, and we was both growing the same type of tomatoes. And I had never grew anything in my life. So daily we come in and we're checking our plants. We started out in the greenhouse, and then they gave us a plot outside, and we started out in the actual garden. But in the plot inside in the greenhouse, I'm looking at his. He got these beautiful red bulbs growing on his plant. Mine don't have any yet. So I asked him, I'm like, this dude grew up planting. He grew up doing this. And I asked him, I said, what's wrong? Well, why is my plant not growing tomatoes? And he looked at my plant, and he instantly knew what the issue was. And he explained this to me. He said that the plant is pulling nutrients out of the soil. Once you water the soil and you use your fertilizer, and the plants is pulling those nutrients from the soil, and it's evenly distributing those nutrients throughout the stems. He said, now you have stems that don't have fruit on them. He said, what I do is all the stems without fruit on them, I cut them off so that all the nutrients can go to the stems that have fruit. And that's why my fruit, his tomato, is growing more than yours are. The brain acts in the same way. The brain works in the exact same way because the brain uses so much energy. Any ideas, concepts, anything that you don't use on the regular, the brain literally kills the neural pathways for that activity. because the brain says to itself, oh, we don't need this to survive. So let me eliminate this because this is taking some of our energy. But anything that you do on a regular basis, even memorizing ideas and words, the brain automatically says, oh, this must be a survival mechanism. This must be something we need. So the brain literally develops neural pathways for memorizing ideas. So when you start to memorizing 10 virtues or supreme mathematics or whatever information it is that you're committing to memory, the next time you try to commit something to memory, it actually becomes easier because your brain has actually created a neural highway just for memorizing ideas because the brain thinks that it's necessary for survival. So we did that for that purpose. But also, if you look at the 10 virtues of a student, the last virtue, number 10, is preparedness for initiation. And as I talk about with the vocab rehab, to prepare means to get ready or to make ready, to before something. So I'm making preparation before, preparing for initiation. To initiate literally means to start. When you get in the car, the first thing you do is you turn the ignition. You know, you initiate, you ignite, you start. Learning the 10 virtues is not the end, even though many of the brothers who hadn't even finished school celebrated learning those 10 virtues. But learning those 10 virtues have just showed that you have the dedication to start the process of learning. And then we go through all the different classes that's necessary, because what we were trying to do was create king level manhood. You know, what we was attempting to do, the goal of the Huru Shule was to create supreme manhood. It's called the Huru Shule, the liberation school, for a reason, because the ideal is that we are limited by our lack of knowledge. Our ignorance is what keeps us slaves. It's what keeps us being controlled by others. We're trying to liberate ourselves by getting the proper knowledge. And so we go to the liberation school, the Huru Shule. So basically what I like with E, what I heard Doc asking is a process, a methodology for getting back to power. And I think that a few steps are necessary for that. That's why it has to be a class. You have to first understand what power is and the different levels of power. That's why I brought this book out, because he does that in the very first chapter. In the very first chapter, it's called What is Power? The typology of power. And then he go into force is power, coercion is power, influence is power, competent and legitimate authority is power, manipulation is power, and then he give a summary: white domination, black subordination. So he kind of tells you what power is, the different levels of power. Then he goes into what happened to our power. So these things, I think, is an important part of understanding how to move to the next step. And then we go into the steps of how to get power back. Now, amongst revolutionaries, is part of the problem that I think that we're having is we all have different ideas of how to get back to that power. Many of our greats, look at them, from people like even Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X, who came from the same bloodline, who came from the same school of thought, had different ideas on what it meant to get back to power. They had different ideas. I could simply say this, and then I'm gonna be quiet and let one of the other brothers jump in. If you look at Elijah Muhammad was Malcolm's teacher. Elijah believed in economic power. He was focused on building a self-internalized nation that took care of itself. One of his number one messages was do for self. That was his message. And most of the things that the Nation of Islam did, a lot of people be like, well, the nation not doing anything. What I think they fail to realize is the nation was never developed to liberate all the black people. It would liberate those who wanted to be a part of that Nation of Islam, who wanted to live as a liberated entity. We're not running around trying to get you to see the light. If you see the light, you'll join. You'll get into your supreme mathematics. You'll get into your 120 lessons. You'll get into your supreme alphabet. You'll build. You'll put on the suit. You'll move like we're moving, and then you'll be a part of this liberated, free nation in which we have our own diners. We have our own forms. We have our own everything. We're doing this internally, and Malcolm had a different idea. He had that idea, no doubt, but he looked out from the nation and he saw the overall group of black people still suffering. And so he believed that all black people would not come into the nation. They would not become Islamic. So he tried to create some more secular, kind of like how the Black Panther Party came into being. And it was all based on Malcolm's idea, the Black Panther Party. and he tried to create something secular that would reach over all masses of black people. So there is two methods to power. One method is we're not going to get everybody. Those who are in line with us, we're going to create a self-sustained nation, and we're going to be free here now inside of ourselves. The other method was to reach out to people. And there have been many, many methods. Brother Ian, Brother Younger argue all the time, is the method Pan-Africanism or is it Black nationalism? So it's constantly us trying to figure out what is the proper methodology to get to power. And with that one, I'm a risk.
Sometimes when somebody is not, and this is not just dark side, I'm just saying in general, when we are looking for solutions, but we have not committed ourselves to the level of intellectual study and struggle and sacrifice that's necessary to actually be on the path to see solutions, then when things are provided, you don't see them. I mean, for instance, it's just no different than anything else when it comes to the different levels of knowledge. Things are hidden in plain sight. If I don't recognize what it is because I don't have that study within my toolbox of work, then I don't see it. It's just like how someone can go to school and start studying a specific subject matter, and now all of a sudden they see it everywhere. But before they've actually been introduced to that, they don't see it. So oftentimes when we're reaching out for solutions to anything, if we haven't put ourselves on the path, what we call the path of dealing with that particular component, then it could be right there in front of you. And when someone talks on it, you're not able to associate with it. So part of the thing that we all have to recognize is that if we want to be in the mode of dealing with it, and I'm going to say it from the standpoint of collective solutions, then we have to put ourselves in the right framework in order to be able to recognize what the solutions would be. And oftentimes our people are hungry for solutions, but because they hadn't dealt with what I refer to as the development, the commitment to the pathway of sacrifice required to live in solution-based approaches, then things can be right there in front of them, and they don't recognize them. Which is why within the Panther community we have the acronym called TOYS, Tools of Your Surroundings, and that basically means anything in front of you that you don't recognize as a tool of your empowerment will be used as a tool of your oppression. So in other words, just take just take a tree, the ground, the sky, water, air, everything. All of this is before you. All of this is within your grasp. But because we're not using it, then it gets used against us, and it gets turned into a commodity and sold back to us. Whereas if we knew what we were doing and we recognize these as implementation tools for our empowerment, we will use them for ourselves as opposed to them getting used for us. That's like somebody picking a stick up off the ground, dressing it up, and then selling it back to you, but it's the same stick that you passed over that you could have got for free. And the same thing applies to solutions. When we don't have the intellect or the pathway to already be in the trenches, going back to that dictionary that Syke talked about, because we don't know these words, because we're not studying, because we're not astute, because we hadn't given ourselves the sacrifice necessary to be indoctrinated into a different way of thinking and a different mode of thinking, we can't see what a solution looks like. And so it can be described, and this to me even goes back to some of the things we need to start breaking down even thoroughly. It can be described, which basically means I understand what you're saying, but that don't mean I understand and overstand it. Because to understand is like, and I think you need to start correcting yourself on this. To understand it just simply means that makes sense to me. Okay, I can feel you. I got you on that. That makes sense. I can get where you're going, which is how we do when we break down the problem. And then when we end on a cliff note of talking about what the solution is, but don't go into a class structure of it, I understand what you're getting at. But to understand it basically means I am on the path and I'm in the process of building myself as a neophyte in order to actually go through the steps of being a solution-based person in terms of applying it, the application of what I understand. Okay, I am actually able to do these methods. It's one thing to turn on a car, like you said about the ignition, to turn on the car. Okay, I understand how to drive a vehicle. But to understand a vehicle means I actually know the inner workings of what an engine is, transmission is, all of the combustion is, all of the drivetrain, all of the components that make up the ability for a vehicle to have motion. That's to understand it. Most of us don't understand a damn thing. We understand a lot. I get the concept behind what makes a vehicle work, but I don't understand what a vehicle is. And then to overstand is the ability to actually build your own vehicle, your own mode of transportation. And that's where the solutions come in. And so if I only understand a vehicle, then I'm looking at a solution right there. You're literally looking at the solution. You can step inside the solution. You can start it up. You can drive down the road. But you don't see that that's the solution because you only understand it. You have to be at a point of overstanding it to be able to apply that and make it applicable or embedded within your life. So that, and I say that to say that solutions are all around us. But if we're not developing the mental tenacity to move past 101 and the increments of 101 and actually go into critical analysis in terms of how we approach life and how we approach our problems, then we're not going to be able to actually tangibly see the solution and work out a process. That goes into something, Psych, that you said also about how a person is beginning to establish, they know they're going to prison, so to speak, right? So going into it, I'm going to study those that have been successful in dealing with that obstacle of being confined, in confinement. And so because of that, you was basically put yourself on the pathway of success regardless of the environment. That's again, tools of your surroundings. You know that you're in the surrounding of confinement. So what can I do to now be in a confined environment and thrive? See, that's going into it with an approach of a solution-based opportunity, so to speak. Whereas most of us, because we've been embedded with the victim mentality, we would see that situation as a crutch to us, and we would sink into a depression mode, and we would go into survival mode, as opposed to seeing opportunities no matter what the obstacle is. Most of us don't see obstacles as opportunities for growth. We see obstacles as opportunities, not even I wouldn't even call it opportunities, but things that get in the way of progress, things that get in the way of where you need to go, and then we would waddle in failure. So we don't see failure as a part of the process of growth, a part of the process of solutions. Most people are afraid of failures, which basically means they never take a chance. And one of the things that you learn when you embedded in the process of being a leader, or embedded in the process of having empowerment and operating on empowerment, is the willingness to take a chance, because you recognize that there's growth in making a mistake. If I am a person that is saturated in my own fear of failure, then I won't take a chance, because taking a chance means that I may mess up. And if I may mess up, that basically means that what's going to happen is I'm gonna have a problem with what goes on, and then I'm gonna feel like that mistake that I made or whatever I did wrong, I'm gonna let that defeat me. And so we have to be able to look at failures from a different lens. And in order to be in power, I have to have a different lens on, in terms of how my approach to the environment, my approach to what's before me, and my approach to life. So a person with a victim mentality cannot see a solution. And unfortunately, what's happening to a good percentage of the population of the masses is they are stuck in being a victim. And so a victim can't see a solution. A victim wants a solution. They want an answer. They can't see the process that's right in front of them, because they don't have the mentality to recognize it.
two books that it's a third, but it's a little older. Y'all know the third book is Black Power by Stokely Carmichael and Charles Hamilton. But more modern, and when I say modern, these books is over 20, maybe close to 30 years old actually now. But Blueprint for Black Power by Amos N. Wilson, and I no longer have a copy. I need to order one. Powernomics by Dr. Claude Anderson. These are two books that I think that Black America kind of goes back to when they're trying to understand power dynamics. And if you look at these two books, like Dr. Claude Anderson, he focuses more on economics. Amos Wilson focuses on economics too, but he focuses on the system. He deals with the system. So some of the core diagnosis for Claude Anderson's book and the Powernomics, he essentially says Black America is not a true economic group. And his basic and concept is power equals group economic control. He says there's no real power if the group does not have economic control. So his focus is if you don't control economics, you are permanently dependent. And so he argues that there is no unified economic agenda, no protection of group wealth, and high consumption, low ownership. He's basically said that Black people operate like individuals, not as coordinated economic groups. And his argument is that all other intelligent people operate as coordinated economic groups. That's his basic concept in the book Powernomics. He identifies a few spending traps in Powernomics. Those economic traps are: one, the spending trap. Money flows out immediately, no internal circulation. The integration illusion. Access, you think access equals control when it does not. Sitting at the table does not mean ownership of the kitchen. And then the leadership gap. Leaders focus on civil rights, not economic power. Symbolic wins instead of structural gains. These are the basic concepts that Dr. Claude Anderson gets into in his book. In the Blueprint for Black Power, Amos Wilson focuses more on a total system of control, not just economics. His thing is, in order to expand, you got to expand the battlefield, which is economics, politics, psychology, culture, and institutions. If you don't control those things, then there's no way that you could possibly have power. But for the most part, they kind of complement each other, where Anderson is more on just focused on economic power. Wilson is focused on systemic power. And in his systemic power, economic power is one of those things that he talks about, that he deals with. Anderson starts with economics. Wilson starts with psychology plus systems. And I think that when comparing these two books, or utilizing the details given in these two books, we can find the road to power, or we can find the methods and the understandings toward power. Like in the Blueprint for Black Power, when I was building on it, I took a few notes on it, and to just go over a few things real quick. Amos Wilson, he broke down a typology of power. These are my old notes, but he broke down a typology of power, and he said he talked about force as power. He talked about matter of fact, I can probably read this directly from the book, but he said force is power. Power is force involves the exercise of biological and physical means to prevent another person or group from doing what he or it prefers to do, or to get something to happen to a person or a group that he or it would prefer it did not happen. The force utilized may involve the infliction of bodily pain or injury, including the destruction of life itself and the frustration of basic biological needs. It may also involve the construction of human and physical obstacles to constrain or restrict the freedom and range of movement of another person or group. That's him explaining force is power. I'm not going to get into all of them because I think we've agreed that we're going to kind of build a class around this. But in Amos N. Wilson's book, he deals with, again, the typology of power in his very first chapter. He talked about force is power, coercion is power, influence is power, competent and legitimate authority as power. We see that a lot. That's more than anything else in the Black community. Probably one of the few powers that we always identify with. That competent and legitimate authority as power. We submit to that a lot. You know, the preacher has power because we believe that he knows what he's talking about. Farrakhan, he's one of our brothers throughout the years that brothers have always automatically respected because he's seen as competent and legitimate authority. He's seen as competent. He knows what he's talking about. Malcolm X, even though he's passed, when I first met E, he was consistently building from Malcolm. So that's why they always throw the Black leader in front of us, because we've always respected competent and legitimate authority as power. Even if you notice, and I don't think this is just a Black thing. I think this is a human thing. If we look at the Chicago mob, and we all heard of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, where mobsters dressed up like police officers. And just by having the uniform on, they dictated other mobsters to get against the wall and prepare for search, and then they gunned them down. They submitted because they had on that uniform, and that uniform represented legitimate authority. So they submitted to that. So these are the different typologies of power that Amos N. Wilson talks about. When you're driving down the street and somebody get behind you and a siren goes off, you instantly pull over without a thought that this could be somebody that went and bought a siren and is tricking me. Many others that I can use as an example. But these are the different types of power, different levels of power that could be utilized.
Yeah, and unfortunately, respecting authority, command, has also been reduced to the most fundamental level of recognition. Like you said, you know, somebody shows up in a uniform and people automatically get right, whatever that means. But we don't look beyond that. We don't, and if we do notice beyond that, we don't investigate it or think about it. We know that the government is full of shit. We've talked about how full of shit the government is for years, just regular folk. But because we've been conditioned and had that authority conditioned or manipulated to the point that even though we know the government is this way, we continue to run to the government to take care of our issues. We continue to run to the police or to, you know, food stamps, or, you know, Trump and them need to do something, or won't somebody stop Trump, as if somebody else is the authority. We've been taught not to look inward for that authority. There's a difference between dependence and interdependence and independence. So, yeah, I mean, and it still all boils down to that same thing. What Neo said was the problem. Choice. We continually choose to do those things that are not in our best interest and walk by those things that are actually in our best interest. And that's what it all comes down to once again. I mean, you can do classes all day long and have the perfect formula to do what it is we're trying to do, and nobody co-signs because, you know, it's not endorsed by the right rap star, or it doesn't come with a particular seal or look a certain way. Not enough white folks have co-signed, or whatever it is. You know, it's too scary. You know, whatever the excuse is, we still, on a personal level, more and more generationally choose to do what's easiest and not what's best, you know, and that's why for me, I don't see that trend changing. But yeah, I mean that's the best I could give you. You know, we, like I said, we can come up with the best plan and whatnot, but because matter of fact, and I'm not saying it's the best plan, but we had plans that were in place, and folks have commented, remember some of those plans that we were executing. We were executing some of that, at least on the education part. And the people, those within the party, rejected it. Those within the party would say things, I'm not reading no books by no dead people. But it's a fundamental, whether you're doing Amos Wilson, you're doing Claude, it doesn't matter who you're doing, before a doctor is allowed to operate, typically he has to read some books. Before an attorney goes into court and tries a case, he has to read some books. Everybody that wants to be good at something begins with reading something. Less and less in this world because, YouTube and Instagram and all of these instructional videos, but even with that, there's an amount. In fact, those AI agents that we use and create and all of that, from the chat GPTs to the, what is his name? Claude, the one that got leaked here recently. All of these platforms, all this AI shit is based on the conversation that you have with the machine, how well you tell it who it is and what it is you want it to do. It comes back down to the manipulation of the word. Whether you're studying history or you're creating a new LLM for whatever reason, it's the conversation, it's those words. And we're afraid to get back into those words because those words can hurt when we really get down to what it is we're saying, what spells we're casting, and how we're keeping ourselves in the same state by investing in those words or liberating ourselves by investing in some different words. And it's the investment in those different words that you have to read first, because the words ain't just coming out your head. You have to read, pick it up, and start a different conversation. That conversation being studying. And if folks are not willing to do that, like they were back in the day, I ain't reading nothing by no dead man. The part, not the entirety of, but a significant portion of the split that happened in the Dallas chapter of the party was because of the reading requirements that were never even really instituted, were attempted to be instituted. So we were at a state where so-called revolutionaries in their own house were refusing to follow their own rules that they didn't like, i.e. reading, studying. So that mindset, if it's ever been a part, if it is a part, whatever it is, that has to go. Your little sad, fragile ass ego that don't want to deal with the pain, either the pain of what you learned or the pain of having to sit down and shut up. Until that is removed from a personal a choice or a personal decision, then it's not going to change. Don't care what solution somebody gives you, it's not going to change. So the ego in this society is number one. And, we outdo white folks when it comes to Christian. We're more Christian than the white Christian, more Muslim than the white Muslims. So if ego is the thing, we're going to be more ego than all of them. We are some dope ass people. Whatever it is we do, we bring swag, creativity, nuance, difference, totally different directions that other folks just can't even fathom. But we use it to our own self satisfaction. We get our own trinkets and toys rather than investing that back into what it came from. However good we are. I mean, imagine the Africans that are billionaires in this world, in this country. Imagine them actually investing that money, time, effort, energy, image, purpose, all of that, investing that back into the people. But they don't have the consciousness of a connection and a realization of where that greatness came from. You're only great because of the masses of the people. The individuals, the persons, think that they're great in and of themselves, give themselves the credit in this whimsical, magical, not even believed in idea of God. And yeah, that's a conversation that has to take place too. I give praise to God, thank you, God. Now I'm gonna go get into some money and some G-strings and some drink and some da-da-da, all the earthly things that every holy book talks bad about. We go invest in, and thanks God for giving me this. I do this for the people to be an example, blah, 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 blah. You don't. You're a liar and you're a bastard. Stop that shit. We refuse to acknowledge that your greatness only is because we gave this shit to you. What are you going to do for the people now? Give something back. Real, not conversation.
I got a question, just something to put out there since E brought it up. And I think it's a good thought process. the brothers, and I was there for some of it. I wasn't there for the end of it, but I was there for a lot of it in the beginning. The brothers resisted reading. They resisted studying. I don't want to read nothing from a dead person. They resisted these ideals, but they were saying that they was trying to liberate the people. So what was they trying to liberate the people with? And what was they trying to liberate the people from and to, but did not want ideals to build on? I mean, somebody, one of y'all give me and I know y'all can't speak for those people or speak for the thought process that they had, but just your ideal on it. Because to me, I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. I was talking to a brother one time a few years ago, and I was talking about, my big push is reinstating true Black manhood into the family. I think that is the first step to liberation, real liberation. And so my whole mission and everything that I focus my attention on is about building manhood, not to the detriment of the children or the women, but I believe that manhood has to be that core foundation. That manhood has to be that knowledge, that foundation in the family. And so I was building on that. And I had a brother tell me that a man cannot teach him how to be a man. That he thought that manhood just naturally happens as he grew and got bigger. He literally thought as he just got older and just lived, that manhood would just naturally flourish out of him. Not understanding that my thought on that is that we are designed to learn manhood from other men. As little boys, we grow and we watch other men move and operate. And we pick up the things that we admire and that we respect, observation and participation. And we mimic that. When I was growing up, I didn't make up sagging. It was dudes in my neighborhood that I thought that I had a lot of respect for, whose names rang bells. So these guys, I started trying to dress like them. I started trying to talk and move like them. And as I was introduced to different levels of manhood, my expression of manhood changed based on the men that I was around. We always act like that. That's how we're designed. The human brain has what's called mirror neurons, and the human brain will automatically copy anything that we see and hear over and over and over again, because again, as I talked about in the beginning, our brain believes that, if we're steady seeing this or we're steady hearing this, this must be essential for our survival. So let's copy this and start mirroring this. This is just who we are as a people. It's the reason why when you hear a song that you can't stand, but it's on the top 40 and you hear it all day on the radio, you find yourself humming the song and you be like, man, I don't even like that song. Your mirror neurons that copied it. They just simply copied it because the brain is just making sure that you get what you need to survive. And I'll say that to say this, go back to that question. What was those brothers thinking about? Because they was joining an organization that was developed for the most part by people who was no longer alive. They was supposedly reading and building on the ideals of people that had passed before them. Huey said that they were the psychological errors of Malcolm X. He's ideological, my bad. Huey said that we are the ideological errors of Malcolm X. Malcolm X was dead. So if a person walking around in a Panther uniform, they're saying to themselves, I am the ideological error of Malcolm X. What is an ideology? And where do you get Malcolm's ideology from if Malcolm is not allowed to tell it to you and you refuse to read about dead people? I'm trying to understand that. Y'all give me y'all feedback on that.
And I think it just goes into the lens of how we view things. There's things that just have to be prerequisites before you have the right eyesight, should I say. And to me, as an example, I want to say this, and this will give you something to build off of. And it's kind of what I said earlier. To the untrained, a piece of wood is a stick. If it's only a stick, then it serves me no purpose, right? But to the initiate or the initiated, it could be a pine tinder, which then is used to build a house, furniture, bow, a snare, bow and arrows, and so forth. So you see tools as actual tools, which are things that you do to empower yourself, which basically is the difference between someone that is a consumer and someone that is a producer. They don't operate in the same lane. And so if I am untrained, then I can't identify, and I don't know what that is. To me, that even goes back to the examples of the books that you gave, Psych. And so now I got to give a breakdown on that because a lot of times we don't recognize what books are. Like you said, uh, if you get responses like "I ain't gonna read nothing by nothing from no dead people," then then all I'm doing is looking at a book is as a stick. When someone makes a statement like that, that book is literally a stick. It serves me no purpose. I am going to walk over it and keep walking down the road because I don't identify that as a pathway. It's an obstacle. It really literally is an obstacle. So that one thing that is an empowerment tool for somebody that is initiated in the pathway of power is an obstacle to somebody that is operating as a consumer or a victim. And that to me, that is an entirely different way of viewing life. And that's what we're finding ourselves is that a lot of times when people don't know that they don't know, they don't recognize that that stick is really not a stick, but that stick is everything. And so if I don't know that I don't know, and I'm arrogant in my position of being uninitiated or unaware, and I'm not ready to grow, because that's the biggest thing. If I'm not ready to grow, but I'm hungry for nutrients, but I consume junk food, right? Mental junk food. I'm not ready to grow. I say one thing, but that don't mean I'm actually ready for it. And again, that even goes in the concept of what I call willing, able, and ready. A lot of people call themselves being willing to do something, which is the majority of people that participate in protests. Hey, I'm willing, right? But being ready means that I'm in the right mode, right mind frame, and the right and willing to take the right steps to actually make something happen. Okay, that's in being willing and not being able is that now able is I've actually undergone the training and the necessity things to make the steps. So I have to be willing, able, and ready all at the same time, not one or the other, but all three. So then when I see that book, Blueprint for Black Power, I recognize it to be what we call a field guide. Now, what is a field guide? Field guide provides identifications of the surroundings and its uses. So therefore, that stick that I thought was a stick, by having a field guide, I'm able to look at that stick and say, "Oh, that is a pine. It comes from a pine tree. What are all the uses of a pine tree? Well, you got bark, you got this, you got that. I can use it to make teas. I can use it to ward off mosquitoes. It has a built-in, it has built-in properties to ward off termites, all kinds of little stuff like that, as an example. So the deal is, Blueprints for Black Power being a field guide, again, it provides identification of the surroundings and its uses. But if I don't recognize that it's a field guide, it remains a stick. And now Powernomics, when we talk about that, that is what you call a technical manuscript, which provides definition and procedures and the language for operation. So that's why, and I think it's important for people to recognize what we're talking about. Blueprint for Black Power and Powernomics, from that standpoint, are two books providing somewhat the same information, but from two different angles. One being a field guide, the other one being a technical manual. You need both. So when we talk about empowering ourselves and being able to identify solutions and operate from solutions, you need a field guide and you need a technical manuscript. And everything that we operate from, everything that we call ourselves using and wanting to use to empower ourselves, we have to have both sides of the coin in order to make it happen. And to me, that's the short concept of what's going on with that.
I say it's just like all the rest of the shit. We're faddish people. So people come in because they see the black or because they hear certain buzzwords and whatnot. And well, I think it was Farrakhan talking about the Man March. He said most of the people that went, something along these lines, it's not a quote, but most of the folks that went so that they could come back home and say, "Yo, I went," and that's it. I went to a Panther class. I went to a protest. It's that recognition, that lack of actual humility, that ego, just wanting to be patted on the back or seen a certain way, or if the Panther chapter has this mystique, standing up to police with guns or whatever, of course a cat that's running with a set is going to have a certain affinity for that and wants to be seen next to that. If we were seen as just this, this intellectual think tank, we'd have all kind of college groupies, male and female, lining up at the door. I've experienced that firsthand, so I know that's true. When I was in at UNT, first cutting my teeth on the theory, because that's where I came from. It was the theory part. Got to a point where I was fed up with us talking about it and reading and whatnot, and had to, got antsy and started drama within the organization because I wanted to go out in the neighborhood and start doing something with what it is we had. But somebody was having, I think it was the Kappas were having an event, a program. And so I and the organization went and attended it. And one of the questions they asked was something to do with black male and female relationships or whatnot. And everybody kept saying, respect the black woman, getting these applauses. And, somebody, got some that night because they said the right thing in front of a particular chick, and she was just, and gave it away, which is most of the times what we're after anyway. So at some point I stopped, I raised my hand. I told the collective audience, I keep hearing y'all say this, but what is that? Why? Why should I respect black women? Why? You can't just tell me to do this. Again, it's the same idea of saying this is what you're after, but there's no in between. There's no how to get there. So get me to I want to respect black women, but you got to give me a reason. Why? What is it that I'm supposed to do? So eventually they went back and forth. And so of course, black folk, we're going to flip it around and say, well, you tell us, what is it we supposed to da-da-da-da-da-da? So instead of giving them any information, I told them to come to our study group and gave them the night, the time, all of that stuff. So the next study group, I believe, was the next night. So we went to our study group where we had typically about 4 people in our study group. That night we had about 50 or 60 people show up, all female. I didn't realize, I thought they were there because I honestly thought, in my naivete at that point in life, that they were there to get the information. But then as I was speaking, or at some point in the night, my wife and 2 children came in the room. We had strollers, came in, and it was obvious she and I were together. The next meeting, we were back down to our usual 4 people. None of those sisters showed up for the information. They showed up for the sound. They showed up for the ooh. They showed up for the show. But when it came time to actually be about the conversation, nobody was there. So we're looking for that buzz. We're looking for that immediate gratification. We're looking for something to feed our ego because, again, the society is built around the satisfaction of your ego to maintain. And you could get really, really deep with shit, but to maintain what it is they've got, part of what they've got to do is to constantly be manipulating your ego and have you living in your ego, as opposed to digging beyond that and getting down to who it is we are, So yeah, it's that, unfortunately, it's that personal choice.
Point being, there is really what it boils down to. Like I said, we have to have classes, but we still people have to move away from thinking that there is a shortcut. And to me, that goes back to what I call a victim mentality. We are willing and we want a change. We do really want a change, but we're not ready for the process of change. Because the process of change, there is no shortcut. I'm gonna have to do this long study. It's like something he used to continually bring to our attention. In fact, you said it as well, Sight. The school of initiation, in ancient times, for specifically Kemet, when we talk about this, you had to go to school for decades in order to be at a point of where you are able to be an operative within that environment, within that society. There's no shortcuts. Right now, we're looking for shortcuts to something that is a requirement in order to be able to, again, just identify it. And I use this as an example because I wanted to kind of try to make it plain to the average person. Most people don't see Blueprint for Black Power as a field guide. Most people don't know what a field guide is. And so if I don't even know what a field guide is, I don't know what book to pick up in order to even head down that path. I have to know the difference between a field guide and a technical manual. And so the first thing, like when you like what you said and breaking it down in terms of the process of having a dictionary and a thesaurus. If I'm going to be a true student for whatever it is that I'm wanting to study and empower myself on, there are going to be some essential things that I'm gonna have that I have to get into before I even get into the subject matter. It's like when folks go to school and they force you to take English, a certain math, and a certain language. Everybody hates that. I don't want to have to do that. These things don't make no sense. The reason why they think they don't make sense is because they don't recognize that these are the essential prerequisite components for you to have the aptitude to be able to take in whatever it is with your specific study. So as a student or as somebody that's hungry for a solution or hungry for a way to head in a direction, I got to first be willing to sacrifice the time, the energy, the mental tenacity, like I said, to deal with those prerequisites before I can even step into that spirit of empowerment. And if I have not done that, if I have not done those conditionings, then I can't even see what a solution looks like. Again, it is just a stick. If I have no idea what I'm looking for, because I don't know what it looks like, then how can I be prepared for a solution? And that's what we're talking about. We can't identify what a solution sounds like, looks like, smells like, or tastes like. All I can do is give you a description. It's like somebody, and y'all say it, and we know we hear this all the time. Well, what is an orange? Well, I can tell you what the color is, right? I can kind of describe the texture and so forth. But until you've tasted it, you don't have anything to really work with. And it's the same thing with any solution. There's only so much I can get out of it by trying to describe it to you, which basically means an understanding. But to have an understanding and an overstanding, which is the requirements to actually be able to initiate an embedded process of collective or individual empowerment, I have to walk the walk. I can't simply read it. I can't simply hear somebody talk about it, and I damn sure can't do it for 30 seconds or 1 minute and then copy and paste that and then call myself trying to engage into intellectual conversation. Of course, you can break down aspects of problems that way, which really tends to be symptoms, because most people would interchange those two words, going back to why it's important to have definitions. Because like Sykes said earlier, if he didn't recognize what a word was, he had to stop, dive into it, and determine what that word mean is. Why? Because if we don't know that, then we would think the word problem and to think the word solution are one and the same. And when we think they're one and the same, this applies to everything within our language structure. When we think they're one and the same, they're interchangeable. And if they're interchangeable, that means my core definition is going to be flawed. And if it's flawed, no matter what I head into, I am doomed for failure. Not for the sake of successful growth failure, but for the sake of constantly repeating the same mistakes over and over and over, because I have not put in the prerequisite requirements in order to actually see what a solution is, to actually know the difference between an answer and a solution, because those are not the same things and those are not interchangeable words. So part of, and I would just say today, our little breakdown is to give you the prerequisite requirements to even just be able to attend a class. Because just like how with college is, I can use my college experience as an example. The first day of class, we had 83 students. The first day of class. By the time I graduated, 12 people. Why? Because most of us don't have the tenacity or the readiness or the able or abilities to complete the course requirements necessary just to participate in the field of study that we call us wanting to be a part of and associated with. There are no shortcuts, folks, at least not yet. And so, from that standpoint, when we decide that we want a solution or solutions and we want to be on the path of being part of that group of solutions, then we need to be ready to put in the hard work. The hard work would not just simply mean to watch a few 2-hour videos from the Panther 48 and think you're ready to take on the damn world. That ain't how it go. Instagram, instant. People, you need to break that down. Why is it called Instagram? Instant. What does instant mean? See, these are psychological subliminal things that we don't even pick up on. We are being indoctrinated into having instantaneous answers, which means that if I'm not able to grasp it within 30 seconds or 1 minute, I don't want it. You're not going to be able to be a student of revolution, a student of success, a student of empowerment, a student of solutions with an instantaneous mentality. That vocabulary has to be wiped from your concept of success. Instant success ain't gonna go in the same category. That ain't the same sentence, folks. I hate to burst your bubble with that one, but you can't have instant success, no matter how somebody makes it look after they become successful. Because again, once I'm walking in that pathway, I can reverbalize it and make it sound cool, fly, and easy all day long, because that's what I am. If I've studied it and I've become it and I have embodied it, like what I would say from a martial science standpoint, yeah, I can do a few things like this and make it look fly, cool, and I can be very effective and efficient in it. But there have been years of practice, study, and repetition in order to pull off that one basic maneuver that works every time. But to you watching a 30-second video of me doing like that, and you repeating that, and because the move itself only took a few seconds, you're not going to have the application of how to apply that move in a combat situation, because you have not went through the prerequisites of what it takes to be able to deploy that methodology. There are no easy answers. There is no easy path to victory, people. We have to be what we call foundational, generational, advanced in terms of our approach. And so when the Panther 48 dives into, and have been diving into classes, mind you, we just haven't had A, B, C in a sequence all the way through our videos. We haven't done it from that methodology standpoint, but we have been dropping them. And so if you take this, take that, take this, and you take these elements and you have a spread of books or a spread of things on the table, then they come to fruition. And so we have to be willing to do that. This bookshelf that y'all see behind me, that's how you have to approach solutions. This is how we have to approach our knowledge. You're not gonna find everything in one book. There's no one golden book that's going to teach you all you gotta know. There's not going to be one golden video that teaches you all that you got to know. And so we have to be ready to be students. And those students is a lifelong process to go from the transformation and the transitioning from being a consumer to a producer is a process. You have to embed and embrace the journey. Like we say, don't look at the end game or crossing that finish line. It's not about that victory. It's about the journey. I have to embrace the journey. All of the trials, the tribulations, the failures, the hiccups, the pains, the aches, the stiffness, the sacrifice of my diet, physical, mental, and spiritual, all of that. That is the journey. My journey to being a part of the solution is what you must embrace. That is moving from understanding to understanding to overstanding. No shortcuts, no pain, no gain.
I think that we have to start dealing with power, kind of like, and you talked about the difference in the two books, Powernomics and Blueprint for Black Power. Ironically, I'm gonna tell you something. I read Blueprint for Black Power by Amos and Wilson out here when I was a member of the party. I understood Blueprint for Black Power by Amos and Wilson when I was on hiatus. I didn't really understand it. And I'm gonna tell you something that I think that we do as revolutionaries, as activists, is that one of the things that turned me off from this book when I read it, because it was Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad that came along and said that he believed that all leadership should have a copy of this book. I remember that. For those of you that call yourself Panthers, no matter what division that you belong to, if you respected Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad, he said that he thought all leadership should have this book. Now, when I first went into the book, and he started talking about the very first a moral, political, and economic imperative for the 21st century, the truth is that turned me off. That turned me off. And when he went to talking about economics in the book, I was like, oh man, he's tripping. That's where my head was at. And I think that is one of the power games that have been played on us. We have been taught that if you are benefiting in any way, if your economic situation is improving, that you're not real. This is what we've been taught. And think about what I'm saying. They just give a little thought to what I'm saying. We see the fake preacher that used to be a pimp. You know, he get his congregation, they buy him a new Cadillac, and we judge anything that creates a financial improvement. Anything. One of the things that they did to try to discredit Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad, if you remember when he did the Million Youth March, I can't remember which television station it was. It was so long ago, but I remember one of them. They interviewed him. And then the backdrop, so Mr. Muhammad pulls up in his chauffeured Rolls Royce. They didn't say this was bad, but the implementation was there. The implementation was he can't be real if he's having any kind of money, if he's profiting in any way from this. It can't be real. He can't be serious. So we're given the ideal of the starving artist. We're told that all true revolutionaries have to be broke. All true artists cannot be making profits from their art. That's what we're taught, and we believe in that. And that's one of the things that I thought about while I was down there. I was reading this book for the second time, and it started making sense. And me and the brothers, we built on this. And one of the things that I told them, even down there, that I think one of the real problems, I think that is a part of the movement. And when I say the movement, I'm talking about the movement as a whole, not any particular group that calls themselves a movement. But I think one of the real problems with the movement is that we don't understand the importance of economic power. We shy away from it. We run from it as if it's some kind of stain that illegitimizes us if we're making money in the process. If we even know how to make money, if we even know how to produce resources, that kind of illegitimizes us. But then when we look at our ancestors, it's like, again, I believe reading for formulas. I believe in reading to find a formula for what it is that I'm trying to accomplish. So when I looked at people like Elijah Muhammad or people like Marcus Garvey, these dudes was building economic systems. They was building that. So it was like, and everybody, no matter who you were, no matter if you built it yourself or you was walking around looking for somebody to give it to you, you needed resources. The Black Panther Party built on some levels and was given resources on many levels. It was donated. The Black Panther Party, the version that started in Oakland, California in 1966 by Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale. We constantly look at the history of them being given resources. We are told that they bought copies of the Little Red Book by Chairman Mine and sold it. Another thing that they actually did was they were selling weed too while they were selling those books. So they had to create finances. I'm gonna keep it 100. If you go deep into the study, you'll realize that they was out there on the college campuses selling those little red books, but they was also selling little sacks of weed to the hippies while they was out there, and they had to produce money. It had to be produced. Even us, we wasn't producing money. We sell buttons, we sell shirts, but for the most part, we went in our pockets and put it all together and did the trips and did the events that we had to do. It costs money. Resources were required. But we've been lied to and we've been told that if you're not broke, you're not real. And that I think is a fallacy that we need to get off of. We'll never have power until we get off that. Dr. Claude Anderson in Powernomics says that economic power is the foundation of all group power. And until we get economic power as a group, he's not talking about individuals. He said as a group, because we operate financially or economically as individuals. He said until we start learning how to operate as a group economically, we'll never have power. And then to piggyback, to Panther back on that, Amison Wilson says that you can't operate as a group economically without the proper psychological understanding. There must be a shift in your psychological understanding, which takes place through culture, that gives you the ability to operate as a group economically. These are the discussions that they're having in these two books. And that's why I think that these two books are important to read for anybody that's serious about understanding how to get real Black power. Not just a statement, not just somebody out screaming it, but to actually acquire real Black power and what that really means. And with that, I yield.
Well, let me say this about what you said in terms of starting out. When you talk about how we've been told to basically run from that, I tell people this, and this kind of even goes in, pretty much go into the prerequisites again. Part of being able to be a good student is being a good researcher. If I'm not a good researcher, because I'm part of the copy and paste mentality, that's not researching people. If I'm part of the copy and paste mentality, then I'm not going to be able to do what we call follow the source of the narrative, which means I'm not going to even have the analytical or critical thinking analysis to recognize that, well, if we've been told that if I am attempting to deal with what we call gaining capital, then I won't know the difference between gaining capital or being a capitalist. Why? Because we don't follow the narrative. If we follow the narrative, we'll go back and find that it is our oppressor that has projected that analysis on the Black population in order to continue to make us docile in our approach. That's the whole thing with even when we talk about Black power. Why? And I even find this within some Panther formations. You're afraid to use the word Black power. Why? Because it offends some white people. Why does it offend white people? And why do you think it offends white people? Because they told you that. Why have they told you that? Because to them, should I say, and that's what they've encroached into you, the concept of Black power and white power are one and the same. And they're not interchangeable, people. They're not the same thing. It's no different than it is between the difference between extreme and extremist. Case in point, the FBI put out a memo, and we all aware of this, called Black Identity Extremists. But have you ever heard of a memo called White Identity Extremists? No. And why not? Because the narrative has been projected on us. And therefore, if you are pro Black identity, which is what he talks all the time on, which is Black culture, if you are pro into learning and embedding yourself into what is a true Black culture, that makes you an extremist. Making you an extremist means that you are a terrorist or you are a threat to the status quo. And nobody wants to be a terrorist. Nobody wants to be called that. Nobody wants to be identified as some hate, something that's hateful. Well, who told you Black identity was hate? Who told you Black power meant hate, as white power does? You see, who's in control of your definition? And that's the narrative. And that's part of the problem. Again, one of the prerequisites is you have to know how to follow the source of the narrative. You have to do your research. You have to know where these definitions are coming from and what population are they being embedded in. This is why I tell people all the time, study the tactics of the CIA. Why? Because when you do that, you'll recognize that the whole job and the purpose of them and weaponization in general is to destabilize anything that can be deemed a threat or create a momentum process of dismantling the current status or the current governmental structure. So there's literally a department, and that's not the only one, but as an example, a department who's all about the dismantling of everything that can get in the way of it maintaining and growing its power base. And so, in order to do that, narratives have to be created, concepts have to be created, ways of life have to be created that operate off of what we call chaos, in the chaos theory and embedding chaos, because that path of destruction, that path of making sure that you don't implement or do the right things that can empower you as an individual, family, and a collective. Once I destabilize your ability to do that, then I can set back. And not only do I destabilize it, but I put a method in place to where it becomes perpetual, to where it is generationally taught from and handed down. So I'm going to make sure you hand down that dysfunctionality. So therefore it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And this goes into why when we talk about the books like Willie Lynch syndrome, that those are technical manuals. That is a technical manual. Whereas people may get hung up on, well, that may not be factual. That may not be an actual thing. It is an actual practice, people. And that is the point of a technical manual. It is showing you how to deploy a method of operation that will work and is working. So while you caught up into what are trying to factualize a specific point, which is metaphoric, the point being, those people that are in positions of power that know what power is and recognize how to implement power are using the very thing that you're trying to debate over against you and keeping you divided. Point to them, lost to you. So we have to go through these processes. There are no shortcuts.